Name something that gets passed around.
A joint.
A joint?
Now, streaming live on the Marijuana Agenda.
Oh, really? What are you people? On dope?
It's time for Toker Talk Radio.
Hey, this is great, man.
The voice of the Marijuana Nation.
Marijuana is listed as a Schedule 1 drug. That is absurd.
Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ. That's 650-534-2565.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel?
Hey, man. Am I driving okay?
Toker Talk Radio is your chance to make your voice heard in the Marijuana Nation.
They're walking on their pants with their cap on backwards, listening to Enema Man and Snoopy Poop Dog.
Send that message with clarity that good people don't smoke marijuana.
Now let's get to Toking and Talking with your host, Russ Belville.
Welcome back, everybody, and happy Juneteenth out there. Juneteenth, celebration of the Emancipation Proclamation in the African-American community. And once again, another sad Juneteenth, considering the verdict over this weekend in the Philando Castile case. Once again, law enforcement officer gets away with killing someone. No punishment. Kills him live. Well, the killing didn't happen live. The aftermath happened live on Facebook. And it's just so impossible to hold cops to account. It's like when you hear these stories, they'll do these kind of reviews of them internally, and they'll be like, well, everything happened according to procedure. Yeah, that's because the procedure is defined these days as if a cop feels scared, he can shoot and kill people. That's really where these Supreme Court decisions and these verdicts and these acquittals what they basically come down to. If a cop feels scared, he can kill people. Whatever happened to bravery among our police officers? There's a case that's going on right now in Seattle. This just happened this weekend where a woman, African-American woman, surprise, African-American woman who's had a history of mental health issues, got some kids, has had some problems, has had the cops called to her place a few times, but she's just obviously struggling with life. She calls the cops herself this weekend for reasons I didn't look into, but when the cops show up, she decides that she doesn't want to talk to the cops or deal with the cops, and she's got a knife. So the cops shot her point blank in her doorway. See, this idea that the minute someone shows a weapon, it's time for the cops to shoot and kill them is the problem here. Now, I'm not a total Pollyanna on this. I'm not like, cops ought to, be carrying, giving out free hugs and pats on the back or anything like that. I understand that it's a dangerous world out there, and I understand that cops do need to be able to use deadly force, but it ought to be the very, very last resort. Are you telling me two cops, because there was two cops at the doorway at the time this happened, two cops who have batons and tasers and hand-to-hand resistance training, how to grapple, how to deal with people and secure them, couldn't have done that? You're telling me these two cops couldn't have backed off? Like immediately back up, whoa, back way up. There was no report that the woman lunged at them, that she brandished the knife in a way to harm them or threaten them. She just shows the knife and blam, the cops shoot her dead. And they'll probably get away with it. Because again, the standard is if you can convince a jury those cops felt scared at the time, then it's okay for them to kill people, especially if they're black. That's just the way the acquittals have gone. That's just the way these trials have gone. You have to have a cop shooting a guy running away and shooting him in the standing calmly and shooting him in the back on video before you can get any sort of prosecution. That was the Walter Scott case. Officer Schlager pled guilty to some of his charges. Any other case, though, and boom, it's guns a-blazing. And it's frustrating here because you see other cases that come up with white suspects. They seem to be taken into custody just fine. Perfect example. Again, here from the Pacific Northwest. Here in Seattle, we had the lady with the mental health issues brandishes a knife at the two cops, and so they shoot her dead. Here in Portland, a few weeks ago, we had Jeremy Joseph Christian, the terrorist who was terrorizing the two young Muslim girls. 3 white men intervened to try to get him to stop, to leave those girls alone. Christian, the white man, pulls a blade and slashes the throats of 3 people, killing 2 of them. Runs away off of the train. Cops are called. Cops managed to find the guy hiding a few blocks away. Got the knife on him. Managed to take him into custody. No harm, no guns, no shots, nothing. Of course, maybe he didn't smell like marijuana, right? He's a white guy and he didn't smell like marijuana. Must be okay for us to take this guy down. Case after case after case, we see this happen. And we don't see it happen anywhere else on the planet. We have countries that haven't had in their lifespan, like the entire history of that country's police forces, do not have a record of shooting and killing people that matches 1 year in America. Some countries have fewer officer killings than we have in a single week in America. There's something very wrong, and we got to fix it.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Hi, I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Putting together the most comprehensive live weekday marijuana news talk program is a full-time job. Now you can do your part to ensure that listener-supported independent cannabis radio journalism can continue by becoming a patron of the Marijuana Agenda. Just log on to mjagenda.com and click the Become a Patron button. For your $4.20 monthly donation, you'll receive over 20 hours of original first-hour podcasts, plus other materials only available to paid subscribers. Or for just $9.99 a month, become a VIP patron. You'll get over 40 hours of podcasts for the complete program, including Toker Talk Radio, plus ad-free downloads of the segments heard on the Marijuana Agenda. Plus, VIPs get exclusive access to the video replay of the 2-hour live stream show and downloads of the spreadsheets and charts I provide from my years of curating marijuana data sets. Thank you for your support, and remember, I cannot do it without you. Please become a patron today at mjagenda.com. And now, in the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Marijuana Agenda presents this anti-drug public service announcement.
If you have teenagers, I'm asking you to have a very difficult talk with them. Not about sex. For a lot of us, that would be easy compared to drugs. Drugs like cocaine and crack. But you must talk to them about drugs. If you don't talk about it, if you don't fight it, why should they? The idea of your kids using cocaine or crack ought to scare you to death. So please, learn about it and talk about it.
To combat this sort of reefer madness, listen to the Marijuana Agenda every weekday at mjagenda.com.
The Marijuana Agenda, like the gay agenda, only with better music.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 2 weeks for Cannabis Q&A with Dr. Mitch Earlywine from the Burning Issues podcast on CannabisRadio.com. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Marijuana is an addictive drug which produces in its users insanity, criminality, and death. Marijuana is the most violence-causing drug in the history of mankind. If the hideous monster Frankenstein came face-to-face with the monster of marijuana, he'd drop dead of fright.
You know, it's not easy trying to debunk 80 years of anti-marijuana propaganda in a 1-hour podcast, but let's try. It's time for the Marijuana Agenda's Reefer Madness Debunked.
Today, we take a look at the Washington Post, which has published an op-ed last Friday by our own Attorney General Jeff Sessions. And it's just so chock full of illogic that it so crystallizes the insanity of Jeff Sessions and his 1980s just say no drug war thinking that I felt it deserved a full segment in Reefer Madness Debunked. Let me read to you a little bit from the Attorney General's op-ed. Drug trafficking is an inherently violent business. If you want to collect a drug debt, you can't and don't file a lawsuit in court. You collect it by the barrel of a gun. For the approximately 52,000 Americans who died of a drug overdose in 2015, drug trafficking was a deadly business. All right, so let's start with this idea that drug trafficking is an inherently violent business. If you want to collect a drug debt, you can't file a lawsuit in court. You collect it by the barrel of a gun. That would be because drugs are inherently violent. No, that's not it. It's because the people who get into drug dealing are inherently violent people. No, that's not. Wait a minute. I know. Is it because anytime you try to eliminate the law of supply and demand through prohibition, it leads to criminals taking over that market? There we go. Yes, now we got it. See, for him to open an op-ed calling for stricter prohibition by noting that prohibition causes violence is the height of illogic. But there's other nuggets of illogic there too. I hope you caught the secondary illogic. He says, for the approximately 52,000 Americans who died of a drug overdose in 2015, drug trafficking is a deadly business. The drug trafficking didn't kill the people who died of the drug overdose. You can tie drug trafficking deaths to people who get into violent shootouts by the drug gangs. That's fine. But for someone who died of a drug overdose, it was the drug taking, not the drug trafficking, that caused the overdose. And when it comes to the drug taking and those 52,000 people that you put into that statistic, Mr. Sessions, not all of them were from illegal drugs. Many of them were from legal prescription opiates as well. So Sessions goes on to talk about how in 2013, Eric Holder in the Department of Justice sent out a memo saying to basically lighten up on prosecuting mandatory minimum sentences, leaving out, say, the weight of certain drugs in the bust, so that you didn't trigger a mandatory minimum. And this was to, reduce the number of low-level offenders, drug mules, and such that get caught up in this mandatory minimum system, which has led to our epidemic of mass incarceration in this country. The Sessions himself notes that federal drug prosecutions from 2011 to 2016 dropped by 23%, and the average sentence length for a drug offender decreased 18% from 2009 to 2016. Now, there's no discussion here as to whether or not that's a part of the next points that he makes in this op-ed. Let me read from Attorney General Sessions' piece here. Before that policy change, the violent crime rate in the United States had fallen steadily for 2 decades, approaching half of what it was in 1991. Within 1 year after the Justice Department softened its approach to drug offenders, the trend of decreasing violent crime reversed. In 2015, the United States suffered the largest single-year increase in the overall violent crime rate since 1991. All right, so these things are true statements, but he's inferring a causation that does not exist. He's saying that because we changed this policy in 2013, the next year, crime rates went up. Therefore, that policy change is what caused the crime rates to go up. We don't know that. There's no indication that that's the case whatsoever. And for violent crime to be going up, we're talking about when we talk about the violent crime rate, it's not just murder and manslaughter and assault. Violent crime also considers rape, sex crime, sex abuse, a lot of crimes that the drug trafficking couldn't possibly be a direct part of. So again, he's counting the entire inflated statistic of violent crime when not all that violent crime has to do with drugs, could have all sorts of other causes. And the point is that violent crime is still way lower than it has been for 30 years ago, but Sessions says they neglect to recognize a disturbing trend that could reverse decades of progress. The increase in murders continued in 2016. Preliminary data from the first half of 2016 shows that large cities in the United States had an average increase in murders of nearly 22%. And again, this goes back to this idea that because this thing happened and then this thing happened, therefore means that one caused the other, and it's not the case. There could be all sorts of explanations for our violent crime that have nothing to do with what's going on in the Holder Memorial, and generally our United States Sentencing Commission and the previous Department of Justice found this to be the case, found that the drug crime problem was independent of the violent crime problem. So, of course, Sessions has put out a new memo that reverses this and says, go after the toughest mandatory minimums that you possibly can. And this is the way he defends it. He says, defenders of the status quo perpetuate the false story that federal prisons are filled with low-level, non-violent drug offenders. The truth is, less than 3% of federal offenders sentenced to imprisonment in 2016 were convicted of simple possession. And in most of those cases, the defendants were drug dealers who accepted plea bargains in return for reduced sentences. Yeah, but what they're calling drug dealers here are sometimes the girlfriends of the drug dealer who don't have someone to roll on, like Kemba Smith, who then ends up doing longer time in prison than the drug dealers that they were trying to get her to go after, trying to get her to flip on. You end up with people like Robert Platshorn that end up doing 29 years in federal prison, who, smuggled in large quantities of marijuana in the United States. But no violence, no coercion, nothing evil about it, just bringing weed to people who want it. There are so many people who end up convicted in the federal system for crimes that aren't simple possession, but really came about because of simple possession. Conspiracy charges, felon in possession of a firearm charges, violation of probation charges, all sorts of charges that don't show up on the stat sheet as simple possession, but they show up as a big trafficking charge. And this other thing, drug dealers who accepted plea bargains in return for reduced sentences is some of the people there for possession. Why did you have to plea bargain? If you had such a great case, why didn't you charge them with the big bad drug dealer sentence? Are you saying that you need marijuana possession as a backstop? Drug possession needs to be a backstop in case your attorneys and prosecutors aren't good enough to prove the case that they were the big bad drug dealers? Isn't there something called innocent until proven guilty in this country? So you're telling me someone who was innocent, you charged them with a big bad drug dealing crime, but rather than take them to court and prove that big bad drug dealing crime, use the threat of that to get them to cop a plea to a simple possession. Because that's the way the system works, Jeff Sessions. You're not fooling anybody. And this idea, less than 3% of federal offenders for simple possession. Well, gee, how many federal offenders do we got? 1 million or so? 3% is a pretty big number of that. He says that, quote, federal drug offenders include major traffickers, gang members, importers, manufacturers, and international drug cartel members. Yes, and it also includes girlfriends and drug mules and simple small-time dealers who don't belong in the same category. And that's what Attorney General Holder and the previous Justice Department recognized. The other part that's maddening about this is he says the price and purity, that price has dropped and purity is at dangerously high levels. Opioid overdoses have tripled and synthetic opiates have risen 73%. So you're telling me under the drug war that you've been raging and want to rage even harder, these things have occurred. And you think doing more of that is going to reverse that somehow. Now, see, this is a distraction technique on Jeff Sessions' part because that stat's been going up for years.
Is it getting chilly in here, or are you wearing an anatomically correct bra?
Well, maybe both. It's 4:20 here in the Pacific Time Zone. Time for us to take our union-mandated safety break. And today we're going to do a little safety break with the curly Q pipe because my messed up finger, it makes it hard for me to hold a joint. I gotta stop hitting my fingers with hammers. That's not how that's supposed to work, is it?
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. And now, in the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Marijuana Agenda presents this anti-drug public service announcement.
So, Sarah, what's going on here? Sarah? Sarah?
She won't answer you. Or she can't.
Why not?
This is the way it's been since she started smoking pot. She's all lazy and boring and... You know, we used to have so much fun together.
And now?
This is what we do.
To combat this sort of reefer madness, listen to the Marijuana Agenda every weekday at mjagenda.com.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for cannabis sports medicine from the Gridiron Cannabis Coalition. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Hello, Mr. Man. Hi. I'm working. I'm sorry. No food till this is done. It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
Welcome back, everybody, and a couple more comments on this Philando Castile verdict. So, here are some of the jurors from the Philando Castile case that acquitted Officer Geronimo Yanez for any charges, manslaughter or reckless discharge of a weapon, for shooting Philando Castile point blank in the car while his girlfriend and her 4-year-old daughter were in the car. Juror number 2 was an older white woman who manages a White Bear Lake gas station that has a contract with police. She said she had never heard of the Philando Castile case. The judge denied an attempt by prosecutors to strike her after it was revealed that she had pro-police posts on her Facebook page. Juror number 11, a middle-aged white man who owns several shotguns and long rifles to hunt pheasants. He said in his questionnaire that the criminal justice system has problems, but it is, quote, the best in the world, end quote. Juror number 4 was a middle-aged white man who had very little knowledge of the case. He said he owns a gun and called the criminal justice system, quote, a very fair process, end. And juror number 9, a white middle-aged computer support worker who was not familiar with the case and said, quote, "I'm thankful we have police officers," end quote. She believes in the right to own a firearm, but added, quote, "I'm trying to stay away from them right now," end quote. Those are some of your jurors. And I'm not even saying necessarily these jurors came to the wrong decision, given the law and the precedent and the instructions they would have been given. Basically, in order to go after a cop for unlawfully killing someone, it's the burden is on the victims. The burden is on the victims to prove that the cop wasn't scared. The default setting right now is if a cop kills you, it's because he feared for his life and you did something wrong. Now, you have to prove you didn't and that he wasn't scared. Even if you didn't do anything wrong, you have to prove he wasn't scared. Because in this case, Philando Castile may have done nothing wrong. He admitted he was a lawful concealed carry holder and was, according to his girlfriend, reaching for his identification as he was ordered. And the part that really grinds me about this case, reading about this case, is that by the account that no one disputes, Castile identified himself as a concealed carry weapons holder. Identified himself, told the cop, "I am a concealed carry holder. I have my weapon with me." If this guy were the robber that Yanez supposedly thought he was, black guy with a wide nose, hell of a description. If this guy was supposedly the robber, why would the robber trying to evade the cops, the kind of guy who might reach into his pants and pull the weapon to kill the cop, why would he tell the cop he's got a concealed carry permit and tell him he's got a weapon on him? That blows the case away from me right there. That right there is why it would have been a mistrial, because I could have never gotten around to acquittal in that. I could have never gotten as soon as Philando Castile says, "Hey, I'm a concealed carry holder. I've got a gun." That's where the cop needs to adjust what's going on in that situation. If the cop really is that scared, the minute he hears, this black guy might be a robber. I smell pot and he's got a gun. You know how those black guys on pot are. Hell, Harry J. Anslinger said it best, right? Crazed Negroes. But if that is the state of mind of Officer Yanez at that point, it is Officer Yanez's responsibility to move carefully and de-escalate that situation. And it really just opens up, what does this mean for Second Amendment rights for black folks? I watched a piece on Viceland the other day, States of Undress, where the lady doing the piece, the woman doing the piece, did a really good job interviewing black women who were arming themselves. They live in Cleveland in these dangerous neighborhoods, and they were just taking it upon themselves to purchase pistols to be able to protect themselves. And at one point in this video, there was a class, a seminar that was being given where a black former law enforcement, I think he was former law enforcement officer, was talking about how to safely be a Second Amendment permitted gun owner as a black person. And that when you deal with cops, you have to tell them, "Hey, I have a gun. I'm a concealed carry holder." And then don't move at all, right? Things that you generally don't have to tell white folks. I can't tell you how many YouTube videos that you could pull up in about a 1-minute search where you can find white people actively brandishing loaded weapons around cops. And those cops don't freak out and start pulling their weapons and blazing away. Lots and lots and lots of cases of that happening. So where's the NRA on this thing, right? Lawful concealed. Guy did everything he was supposed to do. Followed the law, followed the gun laws, lawfully concealed carry, told the cop he was concealed carry. If this guy does everything right and still gets killed for it, just trying to reach for his license, and the cops get away with that, What kind of Second Amendment right is that? I've said many times when we talk about the right to smoke marijuana, yeah, you give us this right to smoke marijuana, but then there's no place we can smoke it, right? No pot lounges, can't smoke it outside, can't smoke it in hotels, can't smoke it in other people's houses unless they, right? So yeah, thanks for the right, but we can't use it. What good is it? Well, that goes for the Second Amendment too. Thanks for the right, but if you're black and you get killed over it, what good is it? And you're not going to hear the NRA speak up anytime soon about this because, well, number one, it was a black guy, and number two, it was marijuana. There's marijuana there. Anytime marijuana is around the gun, forget it. NRA could give a shit about your Second Amendment rights. We've told this story many times that the medical marijuana patients, lawful medical marijuana patients, the county sheriffs want to take away their gun permits. It's like, who needs the gun to defend themselves more than a lawful medical cannabis patient who everyone knows is growing pot in their backyard? That's the guy that needs the gun. But no, you're not going to find the NRA defending medical marijuana patients anytime soon. And just as that, I mean, now look at recreational marijuana becoming legal in 8 states so far, and this is going to become a bigger and a bigger issue. Maybe it isn't so far just because it's western and northeastern states, but there's a lot of hunters in Maine. There got to be a lot of hunters in Maine, right? We get Michigan online in 2018. I know there's a lot of hunters in Michigan. You start telling those Michigan hunters that if they smoke pot, they can't have their duck hunting guns. Where's the NRA on this one? All right, speaking of the Northeast, I got to talk about these guys. Oh my God, the Boston Herald and the Boston Globe. So as you know, up in Massachusetts, they passed marijuana legalization, and then the legislature, which had been pestered for years by activists about doing something about marijuana legalization. You have to do something. You have to do something. People here want it. It's very popular. It's very popular. People want it. Legislature would not budge, would not do a thing. Finally, the people pass an initiative and they go, oh, marijuana. Well, gee, we know exactly what we should do about marijuana now. And the latest thing was they wanted to jack the taxes up from a total of 12%, which would be the lowest in the nation, up to 28%. Now, both of the newspapers in Boston, the Boston Globe, has come out with an editorial entitled, "Dude, Don't Bogart Our Marijuana Revenues." Boston Globe. Yeah. Weren't you guys anti-legalization? I believe the Globe had an editorial policy against legalization, but now you're going to make pot puns. Now you want to make pot puns about your pot money, our marijuana revenues, huh? Our. Yeah, you were against them, right? But no, they're supporting this proposal to jack up marijuana taxes, saying, quote, marijuana should be taxed good and hard. 28% isn't a magic number, but they need to figure out how to make sure that the state and local governments that are regulating this will be able to pay their bills. Right. So let me get this straight. We got 8 states that have legalized marijuana, 4 of them with active programs, 3 of them that are in full swing. Washington set their total taxes at around 37%, plus you get about 9% for or about 8-9% for their sales taxes. So the overall runs at about 45%. State of Oregon, we have no sales tax, but we have a total tax of about 20%. State of Colorado, you got like 25%. None of those states have yet run a deficit in regulating their program, their recreational program. None have run a deficit. 0 of the 3, with taxes ranging from 20 to 45, 46% total. That says to me, any number above 20 is unnecessary. Oregon has already proved you can pay for a state system at 20%. Furthermore, for the state of Massachusetts to be raising a hue and cry, for the Boston Globe and the state of Massachusetts lawmakers there to raise a hue and cry that we're never going to be able to raise enough money from marijuana, we have to make sure the tax is really, really high. Don't bogart our tax revenue. We have to make sure the tax is really, really high so that we can ensure that we're able to pay for this thing. Let me tell you about Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, they get $450,000 for annual state fees for each one of their medical marijuana producers, of which they have 9 licensees so far. $450,000, $50,000 each to get $450,000 total. So far, their medical marijuana program is paying for itself quite well. So don't tell me that this is a money issue, that there's not going to be enough money raised. They furthermore say that part of this 28% increase is they're going to increase the locals, what the locals could get out of the taxes, from 2% to 5%. We're going to bump that up from 2% to 5% because that way it's, quote, designed to incentivize municipalities to allow marijuana retail so that retailers don't cluster in poor communities. 5%, that's real revenue, cash that'll be hard for even wealthy communities to turn around. This addresses a legitimate worry since 19 towns in Massachusetts have already banned or initiated bans in retail pot. Okay, so he's thinking, these editorial guys at the Globe are thinking, that if we increase from 2% to 5%, that much extra money, that extra 3%, is going to sweeten the pot so much, pardon the pun, that these reticent towns will want to accept it. But then in the same breath, they talk about how they approve of allowing the local township, the city council, to ban marijuana shops by just a vote of the city council and not a vote of the people. They seem to think that you raise the tax up to 5% and give the city council the power to ban it, and they're not going to do it because that extra money is going to be so much, they're just going to leave their power to ban alone. Never mind that 19 towns have banned it already, regardless of how much tax revenue is coming up. They didn't even want 2%, but you think 5%, they'll want 5%. That's going to change their mind. The people, by and large, would accept these things. The people would be all for that, but you've taken the people out of that process. Now, they also get to this point where they say, this is in the Globe article again, quote, the second justification that the 28% tax would encourage the black market seems to be scaremongering, reefer tax madness, as it were. It's true that all taxes encourage black markets to some extent, but no empirical data suggests that 28% versus 12% versus some other rate would keep crooks in business. All right, well, let's do some math on that, because according to priceofweed.com, the average price of a high-quality ounce in Massachusetts is currently going for $340. 12% tax on $340 ounce is $40. $40 extra on a 340 ounce takes that to $380. So if I'm a dealer, I can sell at $370 and make $30 an ounce. So your overall 12% tax rate adds $40 to the price of a 340 ounce. 28% tax rate adds $95. So for some reason, let me see if I can get this all right with my math, because I'm a stoner and all. If we raise the sales tax on weed from 2% to 5% for the cities, that little extra bit of money is going to be worth it for them to want to have pot shops. But raising the tax from 12% overall to 28% overall isn't going to add to any sort of incentivization of the black market dealers. 2% to 5% is going to incentivize the legit city dealers, the cities to have legit dealers, but 12% to 28% is not going to incentivize in any meaningful difference the illegitimate dealers. Judges? Yeah, right. Judges, try again. That's right. Judges have trouble with the buttons sometimes. Maybe it's because they hit their finger. God dang. Anyway, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we got some lightning round stories from you. A one-legged dealer avoids jail, some more drug testing stories, and I'll tell you what the Boston Herald had to say about these tax deals in Massachusetts when we return.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Hi, I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Putting together the most comprehensive live weekday marijuana news talk program is a full-time job. Now you can do your part to ensure that listener-supported independent cannabis radio journalism can continue by becoming a patron of the Marijuana Agenda. Just log on to mjagenda.com and click the Become a Patron button. If you're an organization or business looking to promote your brand, we have sponsorship patronage available at mjagenda.com. Sponsorship includes 15 and 30-second ad breaks and 6-minute interviews on the podcast, depending on sponsorship level, which begins at $19.99 a month. Thank you for your support, and remember, I cannot do it without you. Please become a patron today at mjagenda.com. And now, in the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Marijuana Agenda presents this anti-drug public service announcement.
Call it what you want. It's all the same feed. I'm here to tell you that marijuana...
Are they still trying to feed us that junk about weed?
Well, maybe you need to listen, girl. You may not be an addict on the streets, but like my cousin Derek, he sure got hung up on it.
And girls, let me tell you, smoking it can really mess up your lungs.
And you can stop caring about stuff, like school, like your friends.
Well, I can see I'm in the wrong place.
She's headed for a whole lot of trouble.
To combat this sort of reefer madness, listen to the Marijuana Agenda every weekday at mjagenda.com.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
It's like I picked the wrong week to quit smoking.
Learn more at mjagenda.com.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for our Government at Work, the latest in cannabis reform at the local, state, federal, and international level. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Tjena, jag heter David, p.k.a. Dirtball. Vi ska röka hela tiden, alla år.
It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
All right, following up on these two Boston papers that are supporting what I like to call the Weed Dealer Protection Act of 2017. If you haven't been following this, the people of Massachusetts passed this marijuana legalization in 2016, and two of the key parts of it were, number one, people had to vote to ban pot shops. You couldn't let 5 curmudgeons on a city council board who always run unopposed, who are in the back pocket of the local business association, to just outright ban pot. You had to have the vote of the people. And number two, the tax rate would be 12% total. And both of these things were done for very good reason, because the people that promoted these ballot initiatives are longtime marijuana activists who've seen what's gone on in California, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, seen what's happened as cannabis laws have developed. And they've recognized you set that tax rate too high, and you just have dealers undercutting the market. You just have you incentivize and you subsidize the illegal dealing of marijuana with every point of tax you add. And they understood that you had to have the people vote for these bans, because of how I prefaced it. These local city councils are oftentimes just arms of the Chamber of Commerce that are just arms of the existing businesses. And if you give them the right to ban, they're not listening to the people who, as a majority, 54 and higher, voted for marijuana legalization. They're listening to the local shop owners and the car dealerships and the lawyers and all these people that contribute to the Chamber of Commerce and what they want. And many times what they want is to eliminate their competition. They don't want to have pot shops messing up their vision of what an elite business district might look like, destroying our downtown. They don't want any of that. But now the legislature in Massachusetts is trying to pass this bill that raises the tax to 28%. And it's funny. Yeah, I had to tweet this out because it was amazing to me that they said, I'll read straight from the Boston Globe. The proposal would raise the component of the marijuana tax earmarked for the host town or city from 2% to 5%, a boost that is designed to incentivize municipalities to allow marijuana retail so that retailers don't cluster in poorer communities. 5%, that's real revenue, he said, cash that it'll be hard for even wealthy communities to turn aside. Okay, there's your first statement. Raise it from 2 to 5%. It's going to boost cities to want pot shops. Then, 2 paragraphs later, it's true that all taxes encourage black markets to some extent, but no empirical data suggests that the 28% versus 12% versus some other rate would keep crooks in business. What are the perfect rates that minimize black market issues and generate sufficient revenue? Asks Paul Seaborn, a business professor at the University of Denver who studies the marijuana industry. No state seem to have exactly figured out these things. That's a bullshit statement. We may not know what the perfect rate is that minimizes black market issues and generates sufficient revenue, but we do know what the bounds are for generating sufficient revenue. Given that Colorado, Oregon, and Washington are all generating sufficient revenue to run their programs. So we know you need to tax it at least 20% to raise sufficient revenue. We do not know if you could lower that to 15 and still generate sufficient revenue, or lower that to 10 and still generate sufficient revenue. We know if it's as high as 20, you'll generate sufficient revenue. So there's no reason to raise it any higher than 20. So they're able to say a small raise from 2% to 5%, which is a 1.5 times raise in relative figures, is going to make a pot-hating city council say, you know what, we ought to open up business for them legitimate pot dealers because, you know, they were only going to give us X amount of revenue before, but now they're giving us 2.5X revenue. Well, then that's worth our time to go ahead and allow legit pot dealers. But then on the other side, raising from 12% to 28%. Now, 12% to 28% is a 1.3 raise. Not quite a 1.5 relative raise, about a 1.3, about 230% raise overall. I'll do the math. Got the calculator in front of me. Why not do the math, right? Okay, so 28 minus 12 is 16. Divided by the original 12 is 1.333, 1 1/3. Somehow, the crooks, as he puts them, as the Boston Globe puts it, the crooks at a 12% tax rate wouldn't be more in business. There wouldn't be more crooks in business doing better business if they were able to make 1.33 times more. It's worth it for cities to get an increase of 1.5. It's not worth it for crooks to get an increase of 1.33. Come on, you cannot simultaneously hold those positions, Boston Globe. That's just, you're violating, regardless what you think of weed, you're violating fundamentals of logic. It just does not work. And then finally, let me finish this up with the Boston Herald, the more conservative paper in Boston. Their editorial is called "Pushing Back on Pot." At least At least they didn't use a pot pun. So they write that the House version is superior because, quote, that's in large part because the Senate has decided to leave the tax rate for pot sales untouched. It seems progressives in the upper chamber have discovered a sudden appreciation for, one, the lower taxes, and two, respecting the will of the voters. We'll remember this the next time the income tax rollback comes up. Okay, they didn't actually laugh, but... Okay, wait a minute, conservative Boston Herald. Are you for lower taxes and respecting the will of voters or not? You're just against it now because it's weed, or because there's a hypocrisy involved, or because they're hypocritical, you can be hypocritical now? Is that the way this works? Or is somebody going to stick to their principles? They write, the maximum 12% rate, which the Senate would leave intact, is almost certainly too low to cover the regulatory and enforcement costs associated with the major new industry. How do you know? How do you know that this is too low? Why not? Now, just follow me on this one. I know this is crazy thinking. But I got an idea. They call me Radical Russia. Here's a radical idea. How about we implement the law the way the people voted on it? Oh, hold on. I know. The people, what? Let's implement the law the way the people voted on it. And then, after a year, if we haven't raised enough money with that 12% tax in order to pay for the system, then we raise the taxes to whatever they need to be. Oh, my God. I'm sorry. That's crazy. That's just crazy. There's no way that could work. That's insane. Start with what the people voted for and then see if it works. No. If the people voted for it, it must be all fucked up. We're the legislature. We know best. Not those people that have been studying drug policy and volunteering and going to all of these seminars and speeches and reading all about this for the past 20 years. What do they know? They point out how a Democratic senator, champion tax and spender, they call her, now finds herself in the rather awkward position of insisting a particular tax is too high. She has insisted that the 28% tax rate would ensure the black market for pot continues to flourish. But where is the data that says 12% is the sweet spot at which pot dealers put on a suit and tie and go into another line of work? The black market continues to operate in every state that has approved recreational marijuana sales, regardless of its tax rate. And rest assured, Massachusetts won't be any different. Jeez. Once again, what is it about marijuana? The drug that is so powerful, it causes people that don't smoke it to completely lose bearing, to completely lose track of reality they understand on every other subject. In any other discussion, if we were talking to the Boston Herald, a conservative rag, about tax rates, they would tell you, you want to get more of something? Subsidize it. You want to get less of something? Tax it. So if you want to get less legal weed dealing and more illegal weed dealing, raise the tax. This is a concept conservatives are telling me every week, that if we raise the tax on something, we get less of it. That big bad taxes are bad. We'll get more of bad stuff. But now that it's marijuana, oh boom! Now we're all pro big taxes now on the Republican Party, aren't we? And this idea, this non sequitur, that the black market continues to operate in every state that has approved recreational marijuana sales, regardless of tax rate, has no bearing on this discussion whatsoever, because, newsflash, black markets exist in everything. Black markets exist for DVDs and purses and cigars and everything. If there's anything that's legally sold, you can find a black market for it. They're trying to play this all or nothing fallacy, this thing of, well, since the black market hasn't been completely eliminated, then doing anything about it is fruitless. It doesn't matter where we set the tax rate because the black market will never be completely eliminated. Right. You could set the tax rate to 0 and there would still be a black market because legit dealers would still have to pay license fees and have inspections and have storefront overhead. You could set the tax rate you'd have to subsidize. The tax rate would have to be a negative number. You'd actually have to subsidize legal weed dealers to put black market dealers out of business. But conservatives don't understand that when we're talking about weed for some reason. Everything just goes all to hell. The difference between a 12%, who says that 12% is a sweet spot? We don't know. We don't know that 12% is the sweet spot because no one's tried it yet. The lowest sweet spot we've tried yet is 20% in Oregon. That's as low as we've gotten. And we've still found we got a shit ton of money coming in. We're more than paying for the regulatory costs here in Oregon. So we know that the sweet spot is somewhere below 20. I was looking forward to Massachusetts trying 12. And maybe they find that 12 doesn't work. Maybe you try 12% in Massachusetts and, you know, it's a more urban state and your licensing is different and the population demographics are different and the availability and production of weed is different. Maybe 12% wouldn't have been enough. But we'll never know now if you don't pass it. Start at 12. If it's not enough, raise it. How hard does this gotta be, Boston?
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
The Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association and the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit MJBA.net for more details.
And now, another episode of Cannabis Shakespearean Theatre. I'm your host, Leonard Pinth-Garnell III. Tonight we revel in the hilarity of acquiring cannabis when miscommunication occurs between the cannabis delivery service and the consumer. The Royal Shakespearean Cannabis Theatre Company presents the classic David's Not Present piece, made famous by Richard Merrin and Thomas Chong. Enjoy.
Hark! Who goes there?
It is I, David. Pray grant me immediate passage, good sir. I come bearing a package of great import.
Hark! Who goes there?
It is I, David, as I previously informed you. Make haste in unlatching this portal, for I believe the constable hath cast his visage upon me. I bring you the package you seek.
'Tis David?
Affirmative, my good man. 'Tis David. Now open this door forthwith.
David's not present.
For Cannabis Shakespearean Theatre, I'm Leonard Pinth-Garnell III.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 2 weeks for the Cannabis Minority Report from the Minority Cannabis Business Association. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
I have a package here for Radical Rick. Is there a Radical Rick here? How about a Rick Russ? Any Rick Russ? Somebody named Freddie Barack has sent him a package. Anybody? What is that? Sounds like a skunk. It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
I just saw sad news that I have to report. Stephen First has passed away. You don't know the name Stephen First? You know the name Flounder? That's right, Stephen First, the actor who played Flounder in the movie Animal House, has passed away. Damn. I had a lot more to go over, but time flies when you legalize, folks. I ran out of time. I didn't even get to mention Portland's own The Slants, all-Asian rock band, won their suit at the Supreme Court, so you can now trademark offensive racial terminology. Good news for Daniel Snyder's team in Washington.
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
For everyone here at Delta 9 House and Studios, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
You plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down to burn.